In the world of indie games, anything is possible. The only limit is the passion and imagination of the countless teams who set out to make the next best thing. From gaslighting friends in Among Us, to exploring the depths of Hollow Nest, or even the emotionally complex story of Toby Fox's Undertale. The choices are truly endless. And unlike the strict timeline for most AAA publishers, having the ability to add additional flavor text, levels, or textures can often create memorable experiences you'd never get anywhere else. This is why indie titles will always occupy a special place in the game industry. But with its inherent obscurity comes even more unknown and frequently undiscovered secrets. Like for instance, the allegations of Hypnosis at Team Sorcerobe that plagued the anticipated release of their first-person dungeon brawler, Fight Night, which, unbeknownst to them, would unfortunately go down as one of the most unique and tragic launches of an indie title in video game history. Now that's not like a euphemism or alluding to anything in-game. These are actual real-life events involving mic spam hypno, reverse hypnosis to induce baldness and an eating disorder, and using bird memory keys to combat attacks on their recollection of events. But before we get into that wild story of betrayal and the occult, I need to tell you guys about another little game you might have heard of. That's right, because today's sponsor is Raid Shadow Legends! You have no idea just how long I've been waiting to do that. Because I've been wanting to do a raid ad anyways ever since I started YouTube, I downloaded the game and grinded it out myself all the way to level 30. Someone took my name, so I had to use a K. But what I didn't know is that currently there's multiple community weeks and in-game activities for new and existing players where you can get a free legendary and 2 really good epic heroes. However, you can only get a huge starter pack with Teriel from the High Elves faction and then Rector Drath after reaching level 25 by using my special link or the QR code on screen. So you're telling me I've been getting my butt handed to me in the arena and I could have had 3 overpowered champions this entire time? You can get the free legendary Chronicler Adolin, who's a top tier support that can put enemies to sleep without hitting them, can block debuffs, and heal and restore destroyed max HP. She's also conveniently perfect for taking out the Sand Devil. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of enjoy leveling and claiming rewards on mobile games. Gives me that little shot of dopamine I need. But Raid is the first one I've played that's also on PC, so you can grind materials and level up while actually getting some work done. But wait, there's more! Now, for the first time ever, Raid is also offering real-life prizes during the SpringHunt event. How about a free gaming console plus $10,000 worth of Amazon gift cards? To enter, you'll first need to go to springhunt.plarium.com and enter your Raid ID to start the special minigame hunting for hidden items around the Mistwood. You might be surprised what kind of goodies you find. So if you want a chance to earn some IRL prizes, claim endless rewards in-game, and join my exclusive guild, Gucci Rats, use my link or the QR code on screen and enter the promo code SpringHunt24 for some extra silver for you. Thank you so much to Raid for sponsoring this video. Now back to Fight Night. Now to understand what really happened to Fight Night, and why the head developer Bone was accused of hypnosis, and honestly because it'd make for a more interesting video, we first need to start at the beginning. In 1997, when he was just a young lad, co-developer Zeke James would unknowingly draw the initial concept art for Fight Night titled Fright Night. You could really tell this game was a genuine labor of love, as it could be traced all the way back from Zeke's childhood to long nights spent gaming with his good friend, Thomas. In 2011, they would get together and sink hours into invading other players' worlds on Dark Souls as helmet-clad brawlers, using nothing but their fists and a stylish hat to take on an army of swords, bows, and magic. The two found themselves thoroughly amused and enchanted by the peculiar challenge this presented. However, it wouldn't be until 2014 when they'd first get the idea to make their ideal brawling hero into his very own title.
So yeah, I'm Thomas. I'm the main Fight Night developer. We've also got over there Zeke and Tommy and Silker, who are the other devs on the computer, because they're not here.
I'm Thomas LeBlanc. I'm the main creator of Fight Night, and I've been making indie games for probably like 10 years, a little bit longer than that now, I guess.
I was friends with Bone for a long time, and at the very end I helped a lot with like play testing and making trailers and other stuff like that.
Oh, so you helped develop some of the trailers as well?
Yeah, I just recorded some footage and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Did you know Zeke at all?
Yeah. We're all close friends.
We went to college together for a year, and he got at one point a bunch of pictures from his mom of like stuff that he drew when he was a little kid, and we were looking through it and we saw that Fright the Fright Night picture, and we thought that was just really funny. And we had it up on the fridge for like a few months or something. And the phonetic rhyme of that just stuck in our heads and eventually morphed into Fight Night. I think it was Zeke's idea to be like a medieval Punch-Out game. You know, we just sort of went from there and fleshed it out over time. And I think we started actually taking it seriously in like 2014, 2015. I started actually working on the project in serious at the beginning of like 2017, almost right at the start of 2017, I think.
By mixing titles such as Punch-Out for its mechanics, God Hand for its beat-em-up action, and the fantasy world of games like Dark Souls, Zeke and Bone were able to create an original retro dungeon crawler by the name Fight Night, where you'd rely on your own two fists to ascend a magic tower filled with enemies, puzzles, and the occasional traveler. But given that most indie games are small passion projects, they usually don't have a big enough budget to accommodate development and marketing all on their own. Like how we saw during the development of Skullgirls. The team utilized the site appropriately titled Indiegogo to fundraise additional content and characters. They managed to reach an astounding $828,000 over almost 16,000 backers. And with numbers like this, you can start to see why indie developers would pitch not only to the publishers, but their target audience as well. Only 3 years since its original inception, the duo behind Fight Night launched a pretty impressive Kickstarter page, complete with concept art, 3D models, a demo, and a trailer showcasing everything from combat to exploration and even NPCs. The rewards, if you so graciously chose to support them, consisted of the usual early access, in-game credit, a digital copy upon release, the soundtrack, an art book, t-shirt, and even a poster.
Why don't you hitch a ride with me and I'll show you around. We're at our main corporate HQ here. This is primary office, and no, this is my room. I live in my parents' house. This is my room. This is where I do everything. We get a Fight Night poster. Yeah. This is the last Fight Night poster I have because I sent the other ones out to Zeke.
Backers were amazed at the amount of progress they already had because it meant that they could be a part of a Kickstarter game that would actually get made. So with such a polished pitch, it's no surprise that they accumulated 1,621 backers and over $50,000 in just 31 days. Where did you get your start in game development? Because I know Fight Night couldn't have been the first game you worked on. Like, it was really polished by the time you made the Kickstarter campaign.
Oh, thanks. It's funny because it looks so basic to me now. Like, look at those early parts, but I've never worked at a company or anything like that, but I've always been really interested in game dev and stuff. So I've been plinking away at stuff for probably since like 2010, I guess. Multiple failed starts on that. And then I was working on something called Sorcerobe for a good 3 or 4 years. That was like my first like real attempt at making a cohesive, like a big game project, but that wasn't really coming together. It was taking a really long time, and because I was such a perfectionist, I mean, this is probably I'm sure that you've had similar things where, like, you know, you're making something and then it's taking so long, and then you look back at other stuff you made and you're like, oh, this isn't good enough anymore, and then you sort of scrap it and start that part over, and you're just like constantly reiterating stuff, and then you've done all this work, but at the end of the day, like, it doesn't actually amount to all that much because you've just been redoing the same thing over and over. So I was sort of stuck in that cycle for a few years. When I realized that was happening, that was when I sort of decided I had to recalibrate and switch to a different project that I would think would be more completable, and that was where the Fight Night idea came up, because we'd been throwing this around for a while, and it seemed like a much simpler project than the Sorcerobe one I was working on, which is more of like a, you know, top-down Zelda, big open world style thing.
Oh, so Sorcerobe was actually a game you were developing, and then it just became the name of your team?
Yeah, it was just the name of my Twitter account because that was the game I was working on. We eventually just decided to call the team name Team Sorcerobe.
How did you expect your Kickstarter campaign to go before launch?
I think before the Kickstarter came out, we got contacted by a few different publishers at different points, just because I was posting on Twitter and stuff. Those never went anywhere. I think I was talking to Devolver at one point, and then they just stopped replying to my emails. That's the classic Hollywood no, right? Is they just stopped replying. So we weren't really sure like how well it would do, and you could tell from the Kickstarter, like, we had really low. I think the goal was like only $13,000 or something. That was just what I calculated I would need to pay the composer, because he was the only person who actually like requested money. Me and Zeke were just working for free on it.
So you guys actually raised like 5 times what you were planning on doing.
Yeah, we asked for a pitiful amount of money, because now with perspective on everything, I know that $13,000 is basically $0, and like, you can't make a game on that. Like, that's kind of like a joke. You know, we were just so naive, we didn't know anything. We were just like, yeah, you know, just keep working in our parents' basements for 5 years and the game will come out. It'll be fine. The Kickstarter went really well. I think it could have gone even better, but we were very like, oh, no stretch goals, no anything. It's just a game, and if people like it, they'll buy it, and that's it.
I mean, it worked out.
Yeah, it did work out, I guess, for what it is.
With the funding goal being met 5 times over, and having a chance to finally work full-time on their game, Team Sorcerobe sought to quickly deliver on their rewards in an attempt to avoid the routine fear of any successful Kickstarter campaign: scamming. After first gauging interest in potential shirt designs with a poll, t-shirts and posters were sent to backers with almost no delay at all. At the time, it seemed like the announced goal of a PC launch in 2018 was more than achievable. However, the game wouldn't officially launch until November of 2021. There's both good and bad news for why there was such a significant setback. The good news is that on October 3rd, 2017, the 7th Kickstarter update announced their partnership with the publisher Dangen Entertainment, who were going to be adding a Japanese localization to the game. Fight Night was proudly displayed at their booth during the Tokyo Game Show, and Dangen gladly handled all of the logistics for promotion, marking a lucrative relationship from the jump that had the potential to ship their game to an entirely new audience.
They basically gave us the best offer out of everything, which is just that, we keep all the revenue for the PC version, and they just want like 50% for the console port if we were to do a console port for like translations and stuff. And that seemed fair to me because we weren't planning on doing a console port at the time of the Kickstarter, so it was like a bonus in my head at least. Just as a comparison to other publishers, which would ask for 30% like flat out on all of the revenue.
Did this include anything like merchandising or?
Yeah, I think they would have. I think they probably had half the merchandising and stuff like that as well in the contract.
So how was your relationship starting out with Dangen? Obviously, they gave you a pretty penny.
Yeah, it was very positive at first. They translated the demo into Japanese just as like a sign of goodwill, which was very nice. And we plugged that into the Kickstarter demo and stuff. So they helped out with the campaign a little bit.
And if that were it, and they were simply submitting a script for translation, surely it'd only take an additional few months or so for the PC launch, right? Well, Dangen had other plans, in more ways than one. On December 11th, 2018, as the original launch date was supposedly on the horizon, a new trailer showcased recent updates to the graphics and gameplay while notifying backers of the new expected launch in spring of 2019. But they weren't just pushing the date back for no good reason. This came with the exciting news that not only would Fight Night be available on Steam, but they were also expecting ports to PlayStation and the Nintendo Switch. Things were really amping up for Team Sorcerobe. And what had once been a humble project between two friends was now a highly anticipated, full-fledged indie title. But don't get too excited, because this would mark the last time they, or anyone for that matter, would receive any good news for the remainder of this story. Now it's time for the bad news, that after November 29, 2019, would be all-encompassing. On this fateful day, the first of many documents was drafted, titled Dangen Entertainment Warning. And it aimed to do just that, by warning the reader of their staff's alleged predation on young women and indie game developers. More specifically, it focused on their CEO Ben Judd's conduct and a lackluster record of miscommunication with studios, which led to a lot of financial and developmental setbacks. And despite its explosive introduction, only a small segment is actually dedicated to the claim of predatory behavior towards young women. The writer of this lengthy post is a woman who goes by the pseudonym Comfy, who worked as a liaison for Fight Night and Devil Engine to negotiate favorable contracts and mediate disputes. She also assisted in some of the writing for Fight Night, and even dated the head developer Bone, who she later accused of hypnosis-induced assault, but we'll get to that later. If I'm being honest, I don't really understand why this document was headlined in the manner that it was, because if you read only the intro, you'd assume Dangen's entire team were throwing some P. Diddy-style freak-off parties and spending 48 hours alone with the 15-year-old Justin Bieber. Sorry to break it to you, but that is not the case at all. Comfy writes that Dangen Entertainment and Ben Judd are predators that prey on indie game developers and young women. But the only claims of genuine predation, and not some colorful wordplay that relates to their business decisions, falls solely on Ben Judd. Also, Dangen wasn't an established company until May 15, 2017, and the cited allegation is from 2013, 4 years before they were in business. Which is why I don't particularly think it's fair for everyone in this lineup to be painted with such a broad and serious claim. She even further attempts to defend going after all of them by saying they have aided him in gaslighting, isolating, and slandering his victims, and are in fact predators themselves, or at least predator apologists. However, again, I feel like I must reiterate, she provides no alleged victims, stories, or any evidence at all to support this assertion. Now, as far as Ben Judd is concerned, the allegation of predation stems from Ben Judd initiating a relationship with a 24-year-old coworker named Alex in 2013. Alex said that they regretted ever defending and loving him, and that he would keep their relationship a secret at meetups. The thread ends by cautioning others against working with him because he creates spaces where he has access to young, vulnerable devs who are desperate for work. So essentially, every indie game publisher. And as much as I'd love to dive into this alleged abuse of power, only one side of Alex and Ben's conversations is shown in this document. And considering that Alex not only consensually dated him, but apparently loved him at one point, I don't know how I, or anyone really, could possibly judge this with a single out-of-context email exchange. Putting that aside, in the writer Comfy's experience with Ben, she stated that he never explicitly sexually propositioned her, but that he gave her a similar backstory to the email for Alex about his upbringing and wanting to connect with gamer women. Reportedly, the farthest anything ever got was at a nightclub promotional event for Devil Engine, where the two briefly spoke about business before Ben transitioned into questions about her personal life, dating history, and asking her for advice on dating. Depending how developed your work relationship is, you might find this either wildly inappropriate, or conversely like a casual talk amongst coworkers. Both of those are completely valid interpretations. But when the claim is, he's a predator who preys on young women and indie devs, some real Harvey Weinstein shit, and the only evidence provided is a scorned ex from a consensual relationship now 11 years ago, an awkward conversation with a female coworker without any sexual advances, and he hasn't had a relationship in the space since Alex, I'm confused how you could think this was sufficiently substantiated enough to call everyone at Dangen Entertainment a predator.
I never got any kind of bad vibes from them. Ben Judd is like big businessman guy, buys everybody dinner at an expensive restaurant, that sort of thing. I didn't know him at all personally, so I can't really purport to any of it. My ex kept the fact that I was in a relationship with her, she kept that like a secret to Ben Judd, and then was like trying to get on Ben Judd's good side to make things move more smoothly between Devil Engine and Dangen and myself and Dangen and stuff like that. She got in contact with a lot of, I think at least a couple different women who all had some very bad things to say about Ben Judd, and that was when that whole side of things started getting formulated. I was never really involved with that stuff directly. I was just really frustrated by Dangen and didn't want to work with them anymore.
In my opinion, if you read all of the first and second warning documents, this allegation is only present to prime the reader's reaction to the company, as it's being shown to contain men of weak character, who would be capable of anything, which automatically makes all of the information that came afterwards far more palatable and sinister. But that's just me talking. In her own words, all of this is vague, this guy is weird feelings, so I can't properly prove any of it. If that isn't a fucking insane premise to call a guy a dangerous predator, I don't know what is. So let's just try to focus on what the other 99% of what this document is really about, which is how Dangen's handling of contracts and deals led to multiple issues for their indie developers. When I tell you that the allegation is only a small segment, I'm not joking. There are 3 full-length Medium posts that only get more convoluted as you read them. I'll link each one below in case you're interested in reading them for yourself, but there's the first Dangen warning, a rebuttal from the company, and then a rebuttal to the rebuttal. I could write an entire video on the details contained within these documents alone. So to save you the boredom of reviewing contracts, Japanese taxes, revenue share, and royalties, I'm gonna summarize how all of this impacted the release of Fight Night so we can hopefully stay on topic. While Ben Judd was the controversial CEO of Dangen, his former co-founder Nyan wasn't without his own set of problems. Because of a breakdown in communication, unnecessary delays and conflicts arose between the teams. Like how Nyan promised a third-party publisher that a new trailer was coming soon when the Fight Night team had no such plans in their schedule. Or how he threw a wrench in PC development by suddenly announcing that Nintendo of Japan needed a new Switch build ASAP without providing a specific deadline or even what they actually wanted to see in the new build.
Over time, they started getting really demanding with getting builds ready for console ports to show at conventions and stuff like that, and it was wasting a lot of my time. Since I'm the only programmer, if I'm working on a demo build for a convention, I can't be working on the game. They had already asked me for a build to show Nintendo before, but they never ended up showing that build to Nintendo. So then at some point, Nintendo saw the trailer or something, were interested in it, and they were like, okay, now we need another Nintendo build, like a new Nintendo build. And I was like, a new one? Did you show them the old one? And they told me yes, when actually they hadn't. I wasn't able to get it ready within the window, and basically the deal fell through because my Dangen contact lied and said that they had already showed them something when they hadn't.
But to be fair, in their rebuttal, they stated that that's just how working with them goes, and all of this was clearly conveyed to the team ahead of time. A similar problem occurred when Dangen planned to show the game in Taiwan and requested a whole new Chinese Switch build for the event. which yet again paused completion of the final PC version. With the addition of new languages came the need to renegotiate contracts, and when doing so to include the Chinese localization, they used an old template instead of the already agreed upon Fight Night contract, which subsequently incurred an additional $400 legal fee in adjustments for Team Sorcerobe that was never reimbursed. With tensions rising and nothing but delays in sight, Bone updated backers that a new window for launch wouldn't be announced until he was absolutely sure the game was golden. What had first started as an exciting opportunity to expand their target audience quickly became a series of headaches and last-minute troubleshooting completely out of their control. But it would all come to a head on July 24, 2019, when Bone finally snapped and decided to notify Dangen over Slack of his intent to terminate their agreement and completely separate from the publisher. You can see this publicly echoed on their official Twitter account in response to Ben Judd, because despite their falling out, their game had still been displayed on the Dangen website. As the acting liaison for the duration of their relationship, Comfy tried to offer a more amicable solution. She would officially acquire both Devil Engine and Fight Night from Dangen, because at this point, both of the team's devs were fed up and refused to continue working with them. Conveniently, Comfy had also been planning to open her own small publishing business, and was approved for a publishing account with Nintendo that would mean Switch releases for both games could still move forward without a hitch. Now, as nice as that may sound, this solidified that Comfy stood as a competitor in the market, and so between the midst of allegations, it also meant that despite any claims to the contrary, she would undoubtedly benefit financially from disparaging Dangen. The introduction of commerce seriously complicated things, and Dangen wasn't slow on the upkeep either. In their rebuttal, they called out this conflict of interest, and attributed an ulterior motive to the initial Medium article. However, Comfy didn't appear to shy away from this accusation, but rather, she seemed emboldened by it, as it was her right to reap the benefits of her contributions. So in her eyes, she may have seen the acquisition as more of a formality. If we dive further into those final negotiations, we'll see that she mentions that in the event of an alternative resolution, that legal battles are horrible and the public damage to Dangen in such an event would be catastrophic because public opinion almost always sides with the developer. I can definitely see why they'd characterize that as a threat to the CEO. As a publisher, they had already poured in a ton of money for marketing and opportunities to grow Fight Night as a brand. So in return, they were quite unwilling to let it go to a competitor without an official legal notice of separation.
It was relatively easy to sever it because the game hadn't come out yet, and they never even had any claim to the PC revenue at all. Like anything that they paid for, I'd be paying them back for at the time of the release of the game. So I ultimately ended up doing that in order to sever the contract. But it was only a relatively small amount of money, so it wasn't that big of a deal.
Is that part of the reason why there still isn't a console port, or are there plans for that in the future?
Oh no, I'd really like to do that. Since I paid back Dangen, I think it's I don't think there's any legal reason I wouldn't be able to do it. It's in the works. I'm just juggling a lot of different stuff right now.
On September 19, 2019, the CEO Ben and Comfy attempted to draft a contract to sign over the rights for Devil Engine. Ultimately, the decision for Ben's lawyer to create the draft and for Comfy to incur the costs became an unnegotiable nightmare. She did not have the money for such an arrangement, and instead hoped to lean on the previous leniency from Dangen, which allowed her the ability to write up her own contracts on behalf of both Fight Night and Devil Engine. Unfortunately, this time for her, Ben would not budge. Given how frequently the teams were now at odds with each other, any goodwill had gone right out the window. And on top of paying for the lawyer, only Devil Engine was specified in the contract, while a separate solution was planned for Fight Night. This followed a clause further outlining that Comfy would agree to not poach any other Dangen games. When she brought these terms to both of the respective teams, the unanimous veto was all but guaranteed. The result of this disagreement being the first Dangen Warning, that would come out a mere 2 months later. In an attempt to quell public outcry, Ben Judd eventually stepped down as the CEO, and the new CEO, Dan Stern, reassured all of their partners that Dangen would strive to do right by them in the wake of the allegations that negatively impacted their image. Now, if you were only following along on Kickstarter, at this point, you likely had no idea what the hell was going on, and just wanted to get your hands on the fun punching game as soon as possible. Updates would go from monthly to bi-monthly to 3 months, or sometimes even 6.
Hey guys, long time no see, or long time never see. I guess this is a bit overdue. Yeah, sorry about that.
What were these unrelated life circumstances that demanded such a significant portion of Team Sorcerobe's time? Update number 24, on the 24th of October in 2019, announced their separation from their publisher and the obvious localization and console port delays that came with it. But what could possibly be the issue over a year later? Well, in October of 2021, Comfy rounded out the trilogy by publishing her 19-chapter entry titled Why I Left the Fight Night Project. The game was expected to launch on the 30th of next month, so a document of this magnitude pertaining to allegations of assault, deception, and abuse would obviously have a serious impact on marketing and sales. But before we get into that, she actually made a few secret posts about the creation of her document before it was drafted, which are pretty interesting to say the least. And if you haven't noticed already, this is going to take quite the detour from the eloquent writing we've been exposed to so far. On her private account, named Comfy a la Mode, she retells a story that appears to be ripped straight from a science fiction novel. One thread begins by telling readers how she made triggers like Songbird or Like a Liar Bird, Not a Liar to try and make sure Bone couldn't hypnotize her into thinking she was the one in the wrong. Or how he would decide to, quote, brain fuck you with his mouth noises and Mike spam some kind of hypno track he got somewhere. She desperately asked her friends who hadn't been hypno-mind raped to help her, quote, compile some kind of crazy-ass warning / expose / I don't know, because I don't think I'm gonna get hypno-raped for 3 years straight and not say something. Then she ends the thread by quickly mentioning she's been able to get through all of this by utilizing self-hypnosis, which occasionally slipped her into an involuntary hypnotic state. On July 22nd, 2020, the things she accused Bone of consisted of rape for 3 years through Mike-spammed hypno-porn, mind-breaking guys who got close to her, hypnotizing his entire family, attempting to remove her memories, and even made a callback to her Dangen Warnings where she mentioned that she, quote, took out some boomer serial groomist company with some blog posts to save 10% of the game's industry. Hypnosis aside, there was a genuine air of delusions of grandeur on full display. Please, everyone just allow me to be okay for a year so I can literally save the world. How could you be wasting such immense talent? I should be guiding the Ark to the stars or some shit, not trying to survive a hell life because I joined a game dev server once. And I also made my memory key birds, so he became terrified of literally all birds and can't go outside now. LMAO, I actually am that powerful. Please don't try to mind rape me again. Trust and believe, you will not win. Are you afraid of birds?
You know, one thing about that is I think that in a weird way in her head, she was basically saying that she was going to try to get me canceled on Twitter. I think that was actually what that was about.
I never really thought of it that way.
But no, I'm not afraid of birds.
Over Discord with a group of mutual friends, Comfy continued to share that she was reverse hypnotizing Bone to make him bald, to give him an eating disorder, make him terrified of birds, and tell his friends of her story so his game gets canceled. There was additionally a list of what she believed to be key phrases that he would use to put her under suggestion, like suggesting she drank water or needed sleep. On top of that, recordings soon emerged from this time period that were published in Bone's response to the allegations. That Comfy alleged is from an emotional breakdown, and she planned to send them to her therapist for evaluation. There's a slight contradiction in the framing of how the recordings came to be, because in her private post she said she was putting triggers into herself to remember everything that Bone did to her and to spit it all back out like a recorder bird.
I'm better than you. I'm better than you. You can't stop me. You can't stop me. I'm going to ruin your life. I am going to ruin your life. You're fucking going to jail. You're going to fucking jail. Canary mine. Canary, canary. There's so many birds. There's so many birds, he won't know which one. Recording. He won't know which one I'm thinking of. There's so many birds. There's so many birds. Every single bird that you know, every single bird that you know will become something scary. It will be something scary to you. You won't know which one it is. Is that our Robin? You won't know which one it is. You bird? Which bird? I don't know. Which bird is it? I don't know. Which, ow, I don't know. Stop. I don't know. Which bird? Which bird?
It even got so bad at one point that even the friends who sided with Comfy over Bone started sending him what she was posting out of genuine concern. One friend was no longer willing to assist her in her move back home because their mom caught wind of what was going on and was not comfortable letting them go.
Yeah, I knew her, met her, and she was friendly and fun. You know, it was cool. And then as time went on, it really started going sour. The relationship was really going bad. And I came in and I was kind of the guy that really convinced Bone to break up with her.
She had pulled off the breakup nearly perfectly in that she had turned all the mutual friends that we had against me. And then at some point, about a week of the breakup or something like that, the situation morphed quite a bit into this like psychosis stuff and like accusing me of being a hypno rapist and everything. I guess at some point she got the wind that these people weren't on her side anymore. This was the point where she unblocked me and finally talked to me. She never really apologized for it, but she at least made it like obvious that she didn't think that stuff was true anymore. She left with her cats and most of her stuff, but I also kept a couple luggage things because there was just too much stuff. I then mailed those to her after she got back to her home in California. You know, I still deeply cared about this person, and seeing these unhinged things, like she lost her mind or something, was like probably one of the scariest moments in my life.
And with a story so interesting, naturally you'd expect to find a few people giving their own 2 cents. Natalie Lawhead, an activist in the gaming space since her own run-in with the Skyrim composer Jeremy Soule, wrote multiple blogs in support of Comfy. She referred to the talk of Hypnosis as her sarcastically venting about her assault, and that the audio was simply a flashback of a mental breakdown. Personally, I think the amount of detail and the consistency with which Comfy insisted on Hypnosis as both an experienced personal practice and a form of her abuse over a prolonged period makes it hard to immediately shrug off as plain sarcastic venting, and it's one of the more disagreeable conclusions I found in her blogs. This is an extension of her self-hypnotic therapy since before their relationship, and she reassures readers that she is completely lucid in her explanation. For the rest of Natalie's write-up, a majority of the effort is spent highlighting random arguments with Twitter users and attempting to shame supporters of the Fight Night team through guilt by association. She was a major advocate of this case, who Comfy frequently promoted, so I figured it makes sense to mention her, but truthfully, she added little to no substance beyond her initial signal boosting. Now with the hypnotic preamble out of the way, let's have a look at the more structured literature that thankfully more coherently chronicles the alleged abuse at Team Sorcerobe. There are 19 chapters, which means just like her previous write-ups, there are a lot of irrelevant details to sift through. That's not just me being picky, okay? Let me give you a few examples. Like how about at the bottom, where she now states the Dangen CEO Ben Judd was outed as a groomer for consensually dating a 24-year-old. No idea where that came from. Or how about the chapter that's entirely dedicated to her being okay with slurs at Team Sorcerobe? Now, as much as I love a good book, there's simply too much to cover in a reasonable amount of time. So again, if you're interested in reading the full thing, you can find it linked in the description. From start to finish, Comfy details both her romantic and business affairs with the Fight Night developer Bone. After beginning work on the Devil Engine project in early 2017, she managed to run into him through their mutual game developers circle, and the two swiftly embarked on their ill-fated relationship.
Yeah, so she joined this game development circle that Bone and a bunch of other people are part of. I don't know exactly how she entered it. I've never actually been in it, and that's how she got to know everybody.
Surprisingly, they already had a history of relationships going sour at Team Sorcerobe. Bone's prior ex-girlfriend didn't really mesh well with the team, and with the growth and popularity of their game apparently causing immense strain in Zeke's relationship, both of them eventually broke up with their girlfriends around the same time. Because of this, there was a fair amount of hesitation when welcoming Comfy as an assistant writer. An opportunity for her employment arose after an apparent conflict of scheduling and deadlines led to delays in the final script of Fight Night, which needed to be turned into Dangen for several localizations. And when it shipped for translation, questions quickly came back regarding spell checks and proofreading. There also was reportedly a lack of direction in the plot and a main driving force for the antagonist, Strike Knight. later known as Rivali Rosencrantz, the undefeated prince who harbors a personal grudge against Fight Night. We discover in a later segment titled My Contributions to the Story of Fight Night that Comfy considered giving Rivali a true backstory and character arc to be the highlight of her work as the writer. As she further stated, he was essentially a one-dimensional villain whose only function was to be a villain. Now, originally, she renamed him Rivali de la Rose, which obviously didn't make it into the final, but we can still see it portrayed in her handle on her throwaway account. Also, she initially titled her page hosting these articles Ascendant Atrium, as a nod to the name of the final level, but later changed it to the more accurate Ascendant Archive when the game was released. Adjustments like this can either mean she wasn't as involved as she claimed, or they were just changed during the 1.5 years of development time after her breakup with Bone. Speaking of whom, had a real bone to pick with her for the wording in this document, as she claimed she wrote the story of Fight Night.
It might not seem like the most important thing. It's one of the things that's made me the angriest out of everything in this article, because it's the writer, as though she is the primary contributor to the game, which is wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. I wrote like 95% of the script. I have a version from 2018, which is the script before my ex got involved, right? And then I have a version from 2020, which would have been the last script that my ex did anything to. Then I have a final release script, which is the final game, right? And so the 2018 one, which is before my ex got involved, has 1,531 lines. And then the 2020 script, which was the last one my ex touched, has 1,852 lines. So it's a 300-line difference. But we kept track of who did what. My ex's contributions are like 30 lines out of, 2,000 or something, right? And then the final release script is just shy of 3,000 lines. She didn't write it. I mean, that's all I can really say, I guess.
With only 5% of the writing being accredited to Comfy, and as far as we know from their chat logs, the work only having spanned a few months thanks to her declining physical and mental health, it makes her later claims of authoring the story a little ironic when read alongside her complaints on alleged idea plagiarism. In Chapter 3, titled Reported Reasons for Delays on Fight Night, we get our first look into what might have actually caused delays behind the scenes. During development, Bone took on another project in order to help a friend, who Comfy refers to as Carl, on the weekends. He needed the help to create the base engine for his game. This, coupled with the occasional break for gaming with friends over Discord, is what she claims Bone avoided making public to avoid backlash from his Kickstarter backers. Instead, he would try to bring up his relationship with her as a supplementary excuse for delays. She, of course, often vetoed these portions of the updates before they were ever published. However, that did nothing to change how he conveyed the issue to his team, which led to further resentment of her contributions. According to Bone, work on Carl's engine didn't take nearly as much time or effort as she recalled.
So I was in Japan for a period of time, and Carl came to visit for a month, and we decided to make a little prototype together while he was there, and that was what we did for a month. And a month it's a significant period of time, but the development of Fight Night is like 5 years or something, so I don't think that was really hugely relevant.
The stuff with Dangen definitely delayed the game. He spent, I think, like 2 weeks helping make engine and everything. Him gaming, honestly, he wasn't even really gaming much for a long time. The biggest delay of all was dealing with her drama.
I think as far as the Fight Night delays, or like why it didn't come out in 2018, that's mainly just my own perfectionism. Like, I was naive and I underestimated how large a game actually is when you try to make a real game. And then the other aspect of it was that I was taking care of my ex, who was, very sick, and we went through a few suicide scares, honestly, and I felt that I had to go out there and live with her to like keep her safe. And then we came back to Toronto, and this was right when the lockdowns hit, and that was also extremely stressful, and that eventually led to us breaking up. That whole period, which I would say was about a year, was mainly just taken up with me trying to take care of my ex.
And to top it all off, the team still had its historic infighting. You see, Comfy and Zeke would often butt heads, because apparently he wasn't entirely filled in on the fact that she'd be making so many changes to their game. However, surprisingly, around when she broke up with Bone, Comfy went to Zeke and asked him if an alleged promise of splitting revenue share was accurate. This entailed the alleged unapproved 10% redistribution of Zeke's shares that would go towards paying her.
We agreed on a revenue split before the Kickstarter even, which was like a year before I even met my ex. I didn't want to change that. It just seemed wrong to do that. So at one point I offered her to, she could just take 20% of my revenue share since I had the biggest portion. She really didn't like that idea because she thought that I was the auteur creator and the other people were just they weren't earning their revenue, so they should get their revenue cut, essentially. I didn't like that, and I didn't want to do it, but she just sort of wore me down over weeks until eventually I was like, eventually I just gave up and said, okay. During the breakup, they found out about this, and it was one of the reasons I was terrible or whatever. And then after all the crazy accusations died down and I was able to talk to my ex again, she just totally gave up on this whole idea of rev share, just wanted a one-time payout. And then, we agreed on an amount that seemed fair for the work that was done, which is very little actual work. She would listen to me talk about stuff and like say if she liked ideas or not. Me and Zeke talked about it and everything. And I told him my side of this where I just really didn't want to do it. He was actually happy to hear that. And then we went back to our original revenue shares as we agreed on. And that was just what ultimately got paid out to everybody. I'm assuming that he's pretty happy with it considering we're still friends and everything. If he didn't like the revenue that he got, we probably wouldn't be so friendly to each other.
With the dev team drama out of the way, we need to address the elephant in the room. None of this on its own would be able to launch a campaign strong enough to boycott the release of Fight Night. Let's be honest, who cares about a few delays and a breakup? Clearly, there's something else going on here. The associated negative press turned away many potential streamers and reviewers who had previously shown interest in the project. And that's all because of the contents of Chapter 14, titled Our Sexual Relationship. Pay close attention to the first paragraph. Bone had a fetish for non-consensual sex with women who were unconscious, such as when drugged with sleeping pills, hypnotized, or via fantastical technologies such as mind control helmets or audio files imbued with the ability to reprogram women's minds. I didn't view this as problematic, as it seemed fairly unrealistic that any of these methods of rendering a woman incapable of remembering a sexual assault could actually work, and Bone assured me as well that these fantasies were exactly that, mere fantasies. Now you can start to understand why I went over her lengthy posts about hypnosis before reading this document, because it didn't exactly come off as fairly unrealistic, as she explained in full detail her method of reverse hypnosis and self-induced hypnotic therapy. Now, surely you'd imagine she'd at least include her bizarro brain puzzle or bird memory keys, because in the same chapter, she alludes to Bone's ability to make her forget instances of sexual assault. After we broke up, I began having nightmares about Bone sexually assaulting me while I was half asleep, or deliberately ignoring my pleas to stop sexual acts I found uncomfortable or painful. I began remembering times I had awoken from these nightmares, and Bone would insist that I'd simply had a bad dream and to forget all about it. At the time, I didn't know what to call what I was experiencing, so I referred to them as nightmares. A year later, after consulting with several psychiatrists and therapists, I've been told that these are most likely to be flashbacks to real traumatic events, so I will use that term from now on. I am in no way trying to make light of real traumatic events in relationships. It does happen, but can we just take a second to really appreciate how unique and fucking insane what I just read is?
Leave me alone!
Right after they broke up, Comfy said over Discord, to be crystal clear, Bone is very respectful during sex and has never made me feel unsafe. Then 9 days later, he's a hypno-rapist. As far as her professional consultations, I'm sure it's not particularly hard to get a therapist to reaffirm alleged abuse because, for one, why would they want to piss you off and lose a client? And two, they're not mind readers, meaning that even if it was a paranoid delusion, they don't know that. So taking their conclusion on your story to then validate your own assumption is about as circular as your logic can get. However, there is a real tangible story to tell here, but seeing as it's directly used to aid in the self-described argument of nonsensical nightmare dream logic and unpleasant sex being some kind of real flashback to sexual assault, I figured we should ground ourselves in reality ahead of time. Now, after clearing that up, onto her real accusation. On October 28, 2018, Comfy explained to Bone how she had recently been coughing and was incredibly feverish and sweaty. This did not bode well for her winter stay in Canada, as Bone was planning on taking her around the neighborhood to show off the elaborate decorations during Halloween. By the time trick-or-treaters began visiting the house, her fever had reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Bone implored her to at least have a look out the window at the decorations, but she was too dizzy to even sit up in bed. While he was in the room, she was worried about making him sick, but he insisted on at least cuddling. As they were resting together, Bone began trying to initiate intimacy. With her strained voice from the constant fits of coughing, she whispered back in reply, "I'm sick," to which Bone replied that he'd missed her and was looking forward to them being together again. Then, as Comfy was drifting off to sleep, she felt the same familiar initiation from Bone, and she snapped. He quickly apologized and said that he'd forgot. She goes on to explain in less detail how similar encounters occurred through their relationship, and used an excerpt from him on Discord to state that he had now admitted to molesting her while she had a 100-degree fever on Halloween. Bone pointed out that she cut off half of the message in context, but she claimed that cropping the 2 paragraphs did not materially change the story.
We would, non-verbally initiate things like all the time before and after this. It was just like the natural course of things, I guess. I shot my shot and she said no, and then we stopped, That's just like a normal relationship thing. Like, I think what happened was that she fell out of love with me or whatever, and then she wasn't happy. She just didn't like the relationship. Like, I think the fact that it was normal was what bothered her so much. She's been through a lot in life. Like, she's had a lot of crazy shit happen to her. And it's almost like that, like, conditioned her to expect that to be the case. Like, if it's not working out, there has to be some kind of horrible thing that happened. Otherwise, like, why wouldn't I be happy about this, Like, she needed something to, like, justify the way that she was feeling. And so she just, like, came up with a reason eventually. He must have secretly abused me the whole time and then erased my memories, because otherwise, like, it just didn't make sense to her.
She alleged that you misled her to try to get her into a living arrangement with you in Canada.
That was in preparation for her move to Japan, was that she needed somebody to take care of her cats. And I offered to take care of them because I was just living with my parents. And, she ultimately took me up on that offer, but I don't really see what's manipulative about that. My parents are very, very nice people, but I know if I asked them, hey, can I take care of some cats that my girlfriend has, they would have said no. They don't know her, they don't know the situation, they don't know a lot of things. What I did was I told her that it would be fine and that she should just bring the cats. When she got here, I would explain it to my parents and they would say yes. And then she got here and my parents were surprised and I explained it to them and they were fine with it. Because she was going to get a job doing English teaching in Japan, she needs somebody to take care of the cats for the interim period before she could bring them over. I mean, the cats are one thing, but the other thing was that, like, she was hurting herself or trying to hang herself on doorknobs and stuff like that. Basically, her home situation was really unpleasant, and I didn't want her to have to endure that anymore. I felt it was almost a life or death circumstance to get her away from her home in California, where she was living with her parents. That was how she portrayed it to me.
I find myself at a crossroads, where I'm forced to ask how much of this is a self-contained delusion in order to compile a crazy-ass expose, ruin his life, and get his game cancelled, and how much is a genuine story of abuse. Oftentimes, when investigating a case like this, it's hard to find these answers without first identifying a motive. Comfy is an ex-employee and lover, who's had the taste of a successful takedown in the CEO of Dangen Entertainment, Ben Judd. And maybe once wasn't enough. After all, she saved 10% of the gaming industry, so it'd be like providing a much-needed service. Bone made her life a turbulent nightmare, and she felt lied to for the duration of their time together. Instead of a document within the 14 months since their breakup, she could wait right up until the game was near completion to release a statement that remained fresh in everyone's mind. Remember, this is the same woman who drafted a 21-chapter response to Dangen within 4 days of the company's rebuttal to her initial 25-chapter call-out. Even factoring in moving to a new place and settling in, I find it hard to believe a woman this intelligent and diligent would take almost a year and a half for a meager 19 chapters. Therefore, I can only assume that the timing itself is deliberate. But so what if it was timed? Of course you'd want as many people as possible to be aware of your abuse, right? Well, that's not the only issue. We don't know anything about their actual relationship. What conversations preceded her stay in October? What about after? How physically involved were they, and in what forms did it manifest? How serious is the story now being conveyed to thousands of strangers, but more importantly, if she's able to convince herself that nonsensical dreams are real and that she has control over the mystical power of hypnosis, who's to say that she couldn't also conceive of a more convenient reality? As Bone stated, it's just her word against his. Did their relationship really fall apart because of all the lies and abuse? Or did a deteriorating mental and physical condition play a larger role? Honestly, we can only speculate, but my certainty lies in the fact that ultimately none of it matters. Her story was now intertwined with the history of Fight Night, and it was up to the public to reconcile with this new reality. Reviewers felt compelled to highlight the controversy in an ongoing debate over ethical consumption. Naturally, it'd be exceedingly difficult to purchase the game without first wondering if your money was going to the right person.
I also need to address an issue from the get-go.
This game is surrounded in a controversy surrounding a developer and former contributors and people connected to the game.
After cutting ties with their publisher, I don't believe the game ever saw an official console release. So if their Steam page is any indication, there wasn't actually a big influx of negative reviews. In fact, the overwhelming majority are positive, with only 72 being negative and the other 1,075 positive. Even amongst the negative reviews, a lot of them seem to be genuine critiques of the game itself, without a single mention of the allegation towards the devs. How did that affect both you and the launch of Fight Night?
The publisher stuff ostensibly delayed the game, but I don't think it really mattered that much as far as like the end result. The company stuff as well, like it made the game take longer to come out, but we still made the game good at the end. Her big public cancellation, obviously, I think it had a pretty large impact on the success of the game, of course, because that has to be the whole intent of doing it a month before my game comes out.
Oh yeah, it wasn't even my game, but I was really stressed out. He was way more stressed out than I was, and he didn't want to delay the game to battle the allegations, and so the final stretch for a game is really stressful in general, and then having to deal with all that was a nightmare. The game had a little bit of mainstream buzz with the Kickstarter and everything. When the game was about to come out, the final stretch, the last little PR push, and then the release, there wasn't any mainstream buzz at all. I think it's pretty obvious, not getting even like a little blurb. Maybe there's like one or two things.
And I do know for a fact that we had absolutely no journalist coverage whatsoever when the game came out. Like none, literally none. No YouTubers, nothing. You could say, oh, well, maybe the game just sucks or something. But when the Kickstarter came out, there were hundreds of videos, hundreds of articles and stuff. That, to me, it seems like it's pretty objective evidence that there was like a big negative impact on the game when it came out.
Amidst the online debate, the back and forth spanned across their entire friend group, with supportive statements being released on both sides. In a microcosm, it looked like an all-out war. But if we put it into perspective, Comfy's document didn't exactly go viral, and even though Fight Night was a humble indie game, the previous promotional marketing far exceeded the engagement gained from her story. It also didn't help that the odd circumstances of her allegations made it prime for ridicule, because despite claims that it had nothing to do with psychic birds or mind control, there was obvious concrete evidence to the contrary, and something so absurd could hardly be overlooked. What is the game like now, and how is the community?
I guess despite the launch, the game actually has pretty good legs. Like, it's selling reasonably well, and like what I was expecting was a big spike when it launches and then basically goes to nothing. But it's actually been quite consistent over the last couple of years, which has been very nice for me. The community is also pretty fun. There's a lot of people who like the game and tell me they like it a lot, which is always nice, and people are doing fan art and stuff like that.
The Fight Night community is a lot stronger than I thought it'd be. Like, it's not a blockbuster, it hasn't sold like a billion units or anything, but the game keeps selling completely consistently, and it doesn't really drop off. And there are fans that, maybe not very loud or with big audiences, that they've been playing the game, they still talk about the game, there's still fan art being made all the time. I was really shocked at the legs of it, and I know I'm his friend and everything, but I do think it's a great game, and I think that's a testament to it.
Now, 27 years later after its inception, Fight Night has been cloaked in endless controversy, with having to fight both publisher and press just to deliver the promise of a PC launch to those who saw the same vision as a young Zeke and Thomas, embodying a hero who could traverse a cursed land and forge his own destiny with nothing but his own two fists. And in spite of waiting the 3 extra years for development, those who conquered its many twists and turns, and eventually the tower itself, could never truly be free of its curse. Because no matter how little, there would always be a piece of the story, a moment of reprieve from the endless combat, or a fated encounter that would reluctantly conceal an even greater truth. The hypnotic tale of Fight Night is a challenge in and of itself, where we are challenged to believe in things beyond our comprehension, challenged to trust in the unknown. And even long after this chapter is closed, we are challenged to accept the fact that we may never know the full story. But is that really a curse? After all, it's often the challenge that inspires growth, challenging one's beliefs that evokes wisdom, and challenging the unknown that cultivates understanding. So as you inevitably click off this video and delve back into the world devoid of fantasy, if you remember one thing, let it be this. The hardest challenge is to accept that you may never know, and seek truth in spite of it. Because while we may not know everything, it's the challenge that keeps us guessing. Do you think there's a future for Team Sorcerobe? Is there any new games in the works? Is there actually a team left?
It's really Bone. He's always been the main guy, and he's working on stuff, and I think the stuff he's working on is going to be big, and I think there's a very bright future. I think he has a lot of talent and a lot of drive.
I'm definitely, going to keep making games, of course. I'm working on a lot of different stuff right now, but the main thing is this time traveling game that I'm working on. I could give up my identity and just start over as like under some other name and like be a new developer or something and not have to deal with these accusations, but I just really don't think that that's the right thing to do because they're just not true, and I think it would give people a wrong message that like, oh, he's acting guilty, so he must be guilty. I think there needs to be positive examples of people who go through this stuff that aren't completely annihilated by it. There's so many examples of people that have like had similar accusations thrown at them and then they just fucking kill themselves or something. And people need to see that that's not the only way that this narrative can pan out, I guess. So that's why I want to stick around more than anything else.
Thank you all for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. Without wonderful sponsors like Raid and my amazing patrons, these long videos wouldn't be possible. Also, don't forget to collect all those wonderful in-game benefits from Raid by using my link in the description. For those whose interests have been piqued and want to try out the game for yourself, Fight Night is currently available on Steam for $20, and it'll be linked in the description as well. I appreciate the transparency of the team and everyone who responded for comment during the creation of this video. It's not often I have the pleasure of working on a story as unique as this, and for that I am truly grateful. This has been the Hypnotic history of Fight Night. Don't forget to challenge yourselves. And as always, until next time.
Check out Fight Night. Buy it if you like it. That's all I could really say, I guess.